This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
All right. There he is. I wish we were talking on about better things, but boy, that was a disgusting performance on Sunday by the Miami Dolphins. And Cam, one of the things that I've been talking about is you haven't lived it and haven't experienced it, but you've experienced some of it lately.
Mm-hmm.
The threshold that this team never crosses is that they are continually a middling team.
Okay.
And they usually will beat the really bad teams, and then they, most of the time, lose to all the good teams. Once in a while, they'll sneak out a good victory, like they've done with the Bills, twice in 14 games under McDermott. Once in a blue moon, you'll get a victory, but it won't mean anything because it's really not you. Just like yesterday, McDaniel, well, we're still 3-1 and this and that, and you got fans telling me, well, you could still go 4-1 and 5-1. It doesn't mean anything. None of this means anything if you don't win the meaningful games, the ones against the big boys, the Bills, the Philadelphia Eagles coming up, the Chiefs. If you can't prove that you can hang with the elite, then you've got no shot at ever being elite.
This was a tough one for a lot of Dolphins fans. I wasn't up in Buffalo, but I think we talked about this last week on the show. This was a checkpoint for this team because you're 3-0. Everything gets glossy. People around the national football media are talking about you as the best team in football, the best offense ever. You're getting the praise that I think a lot of Dolphins fans have been clamoring for a lot of the year. Like, pay attention to us. We're real, for real. Watch us. And then once you get in the big stage, your game, you laid an egg. And so the reality is that's what people are going to remember you for until you play another big game. And so they're always going to be, you always wonder, why aren't we talked about with the Chiefs, with the Bills, with the Bengals, or not the Bengals this year, but the Chiefs and the Bills. The reason why
we shouldn't pick on the Bengals, bro. That kid didn't practice. He's playing.
Right. But I'm talking about the AFC elite, and it is because of games like this. Because and this is one thing that I had a question about in training camp, and it really erased it because of how they started off. When you play teams that are elite, they can beat you in multiple ways. And what I mean by multiple ways, it's not always run pass. It's speed and physicality. And for this Dolphins team, the one concern I do have is because they win so much with explosiveness and big plays, can they handle the physicality of a team if they're going to punch them in the mouth? And this Sunday was a perfect example of a Bills team that just said, I see your motion, I see your speed. Can you take a punch in the mouth? Can you take it? And the offensive line couldn't take it. They jumped into passing lanes. Tua's first read wasn't there, and the passing game couldn't take it. They hit Raheem Mostert a couple times. He fumbled. He couldn't handle it. And so there's a lot of dudes who didn't, and Vic Fangio certainly on the other end of the side with his ability to adjust, couldn't handle what Ken Dorsey had cooking up. And so it's just one game. I don't want to overreact because the Dolphins still are a good football team, and they're going to get another chance at Buffalo Week 18 here. But they're still the big boss. I've talked about this on TV a little bit. The Bills are kind of like the big boss at the end of the video game. No matter how good you go when you're round, it doesn't matter unless you can beat the big boss. And the Dolphins cannot consistently beat the big boss. And until they do that, the Bills will be the kings of the AFC East, and the Dolphins will be trying to make it to the playoffs.
So anyway, we look at this situation, right? And I get you're 1,000% right. But I think what I'd rather have from McDaniel is the attitude of more being unsatisfied with everything going on than trying to play the child psychology. Well, we're still 3-1 and we still got a whole season in front of us and all this kind of crap. And some of our fans are doing the same shit. Well, you got the Giants in Carolina, bro. That's not going to impress me.
Well, here's what I will say.
Do the post-game show and they win. I'm going to go, okay, great, they won. You're supposed to win, dude. It's like, I'm not giving you any points for winning. You're supposed to win. Win the other games.
Yeah.
Win against the Eagles. Win against – I want a guy – and by the way, talking about this, we're not a team that does the same mistakes over again. Well, brother, I just saw this game. You had like 90 yards in penalties. You had like 9 penalties. You had pre-snap penalties. Well, I guess you're doing the same mistakes. The defense was dog shit, like it was dog shit in week 1. What are you talking about? You're not making the same, we're not a team that makes the same mistake. So yes, you are, dude. You are continuing to make the same mistakes over and over again. And stop selling me that the defense came up with this play or that play or something like that. Brother, you sucked against the Chargers. You finally made a play at the end of the game. Hey, at least you did something in that game, but you were crap the entire time. It's just there's too much of the positivity talk when there needs to be a good spanking like I used to get back in the 70s.
Here's what I would say about that. And I think there's some things you say validity, but you got to realize Mike McDaniel's whole mantra as a head coach is to be positive with everything. And so if you're going to be that coach, you've got to stay that coach. That's what I think people give credit to coaches, where you got to stay consistently the same guy. You can't be the positive guy and then all of a sudden you don't have a game you want and you're yelling at dudes and they're like, who is this? This is not the same dude. Like, for whatever it's worth, your style of coach has to be the same style of coach. Well, often on this show, you'll criticize Flo, and Flo, had a rough end here in Miami, but he was the same guy. He might have been, in some people's eyes, an asshole, a prick, right? But he was the same guy, whether you're 4-0 or 0-4. McDaniel is positive, probably the most positive coach this team's had here for a while, but he is going to be that same guy when you lose too. And so you can't just take it when it's like, oh, it's uplifting Tua, it's awesome, he's looking at things, and then when you lose, you say, well, you've got to be deep into him. I think he does have that element where he can get on players, but he's always going to be a look at the positive, how can we improve in a positive nature rather than just rag a dude down. I think that's honestly how I want my coach. That being said, they have some things to correct. The defense, Vic Fangio, you've got to adjust. Like 48 points against the Bills, that's awful. And I highlighted a lot. I think the decision not to have Xavier Howard on Stephon Diggs was a key mistake. And the thing is, Vic Fangio foreshadowed it during the week. We asked him, did you plan to do that? And he said maybe at some point, but it's not in the plan for this week. And I'll tell you what, Howard wants that matchup. He's faced Diggs. Like, I know there's some fans who don't, who are kind of iffy on Howard because he's been hurt a little bit in the past couple of years.
You know what? I heard that same shit. They've told me, maybe Howard's not that good. Well, you know what? I'll live and die with that. I can't live and die knowing that you put a second-year corner, undrafted Division II corner on one of the 5, if not, no, okay, Stephon Diggs is one of the 5 best receivers, but he might be either 1 or 2 when it comes to route running. Yeah, because he's always been an exceptional route runner since he came out of college. He was an exceptional route runner.
Excellent. Okay? And here's my thing. Xavier Howard is still one of the best ball hawks, if not the best ball hawk in football. And so you deter some passage just from the fact that Josh Allen's like, man, if I don't throw this right, X might take this to the crib. And even if X might get beat once or twice on Diggs, he's going to get his if you make the wrong decision. Cater, I don't think at this stage of his career is going to make those plays to make you worry about him. And Ken Dorsey, the Bills offensive coordinator, had a great scheme. Once they realized that Howard wasn't going to be shadowing Diggs, they made sure every single time to motion Stephon Diggs to Cater so that they saw the one-on-one coverage. He had all 3 touchdowns when Stephon Diggs motioned to his side. I think that's the most touchdowns out of motion since 2016. And so there was a clear game plan. We like our matchup, Stephon Diggs versus Cater, and they exposed him. And I get maybe early on you say, hey, we're going to play our scheme. But once you see Diggs start to have that type of impact, you've got to adjust. The Dolphins didn't adjust. I think that was a big mistake. I think people still underestimate what X can do against top receivers, especially in a zone coverage when you're not doing cover 0 blitz all the time. You pay him all that money, you give him that excitement. I get when you trade for Jalen Ramsey, the idea is we're going to have one corner on one side, one corner on the other. You don't have to follow anymore. You just get sides, but you don't have Jalen Ramsey.
Wait a minute. That's not true. That's not true. We all talked about when they acquired Jalen Ramsey that, oh, no, Fangio's going to use him in that star position where they move him around. Remember? We talked about that.
That was an option, but that does not mean that was their plan.
Well,
but I'm saying
apparently that's not a plan. Yeah, that's what we hear.
Well, I mean, he's not here, so they don't have any plan because he's not playing right now. But I'm saying I can understand if you playing sides when you have a Jalen Ramsey on the field. You don't need to play sides when you have a Stephon Diggs and you have X on the field. In most games, you're fine with that. If you're playing the New England Patriots, no, you don't need to shadow anybody because they don't have anybody on that team. If you're playing the Chargers, where you have two true top receivers in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, no need to shadow because both of those guys can beat you. But when you have a true number one and no clear number two for the Bills, that's when you put Cater on Gabe Davis and you put X on Diggs. And I'm eager to see how they adjust. Of course, they're going to play the Bills week 18, but they're going to have Devontae Adams coming up here in 3 or 4 weeks. They're going to have CeeDee Lamb coming up here in a few weeks. So these are games where you have to be able to adjust, or teams are just going to pick you apart.
Your thoughts on McDermott versus McDaniel, because my Lord, he outcoached. I mean, he freaking schooled McDaniel badly. And I'm going to give McDermott half the credit. And then the other half, I got to give all those players, bro, from,
they played amazing.
Ano, Terrell Bernard,
Micah Hyde,
Oliver,
Greg Rousseau,
Jones,
Daquan Jones,
dude, those guys, like, they stepped up and the scheme was perfect. They bracketed Tyreek.
Played a lot of cover two.
It's hilarious. Yeah, it's hilarious how they adjusted to their number one, to our number one, but we didn't adjust to their number one. It's hilarious how, okay, let's take Tyreek out in this game, but
they took Jalen out too for the most part too. They took Jalen out for the most part too.
Yeah. Well, but that's more on Jalen. I'll blame more on Jalen and the coach and the quarterback, because he's getting one-on-one, so you better find a way to get him more involved. I don't know. But my point is they purposely schemed out the number one guy. And you just said when you don't have the two, when you have the two quarters, you don't have to move around. But when you don't have them, you're going to have to move them around. Well, guess what? They were willing to take out one guy and leave the other guy all one-on-one, and yet they still schemed them right out. And Miami failed to do the same thing against Diggs. So your thoughts on the way McDermott schemed it, which the way he schemed it, because I watched it again yesterday, it was masterful where he put his players in positions, and then the decisions, obviously, that their players made too were phenomenal.
Yeah, if we give Mike McDaniel credit for the 70 points and the motion and all the creative stuff, then we got to call it what it is when he has a game like it is. Sean McDermott won that matchup. It was definitely a clear win for Sean McDermott over Mike McDaniel. Now, Mike will get another chance, and Mike has done well when he's got a second chance at a coach, and so I'm eager to see that. He did against the Chargers. The Chargers got him completely last year, and this year he got him.
This is his fifth chance coming up. He's 1-3.
I understand one of those games wasn't with Tua, but I get your point. Overall, here's what I would say. It started off as a shootout. The Dolphins offense, the first scripted plays, they looked like the offense we saw over the first 3 weeks. They were moving the ball. They scored 14. It was 14-14 early. And then they shifted. They adjusted. Sometime in the second quarter, not too long before Teron Armstead got injured, you started to see an uptick of pressure, particularly interior pressure, on the Dolphins' offensive line. And they dropped those linebackers just enough in coverage that they disrupted those pass lanes. You even saw some of their defensive ends standing up and just putting their hands up. They're a lengthy, long team. They have a lot of 6'5" dudes who are playing defensive end. And so they can get their hands up. And if they just disrupt the little slant timing, disrupt the little wheel timing, just enough, they'll make Tua double clutch and maybe go to a second read and let that pressure get home. That's something teams did not do enough of. And I wonder, not every team has the personnel that the Bills do. They have an elite group of linebackers, which linebackers is sort of a lost art in the current NFL because everybody's looking for speed. When you have
Miami doesn't have one linebacker that comes close to theirs.
Right. And so People always people always ask for a blueprint, and maybe the Bills showed some things just like the Patriots showed some things, but they have certain players and certain personnel that allow them to do that. The ability to have the linebackers like Matt Milano and Bernard, and also have at least one of your two safeties and Micah Hyde in the middle, allows you to control that middle of the field and communicate. They did not get caught up in the eye candy of the motion like a lot of teams as well. And so I think that's something they really did starting in the second quarter. And then once they got the Dolphins down, because we hadn't seen this Dolphins team down significantly. Once they saw this Dolphins team down, the Dolphins abandoned the run game, and they could just tee their heads back and just attack, because the cover two, the whole idea of cover two is you have to run the ball to get them out of cover two. Once you get up, you can stay in cover two because they're not going to run the ball, clearly. And so that's an element of why the Bills had a lot of success, and the Dolphins just scored 20 points. So the defense deserves a lot of blame, but it also is noteworthy how the Bills slowed down this offense.
By the way, if you look at the film, they took away Tua's second option also a lot of times, not just the first option. Go look at the film. A lot of times he had to go to his third option. They did an exceptional job, and then that's what allowed them to pressure him on top of all of that. When, linemen can have an excellent game, a great game, a fantastic game, a good game, and make one mistake in the game, and you still had one hell of a game. When you had a bad game, you probably made 2 or 3 mistakes in a game, and there's a lot of snaps. There's like 60 snaps, and you only made 2 or 3, but that's a bad game. Liam Eichenberg might have made, 5, 6, maybe 7 mistakes in the game. A lot of other times he actually did his job. I looked at the film. There were times where he was part of some good blocks that were big gainers and good plays. But the problem was when he would make a mistake, and he made at least 5, 6, maybe even 7 of them, they ended up becoming big mistakes, from a sack to obviously Armstead getting injured, all that kind of stuff. He is just not a starter, dude.
Correct. He's a backup offensive lineman, and backup offensive linemen get exposed with more play time. I heard a lot of fans say they weren't worried about the Connor Williams absence because Liam played good in the second half last week, right? The Dolphins were up. He did, but the Dolphins were up 21 points. And so it's a lot different.
They were facing the Bills.
Yes, they weren't facing the Bills. They were facing the Dolphins, the Broncos defense. And so a lot of times with time, backups get exposed. And so that's why, although the offensive lines played amazing over the first 3 weeks, I was hesitant to crown them as this thing is completely fixed, because a lot of it is Tua getting the ball out extremely quickly.
Yeah.
And we hadn't seen them against a defense that was going to be able to bring the pressure consistently. Teron's out and Connor's out, and you start to see cracks. And Tua was sacked 4 times. He was hit 9 times. That's more than he had been hit combined in the first 3 games. 3 times as many sacks as he had the first 3 games combined. And so you start to see some cracks in that offensive line, especially if you fall behind. And so they're going to be without Teron with some time. I'm told it's going to be multiple weeks.
Kendall Lamb did not play bad, actually. If you watch it,
but again,
the only time. Well, hold on a second. The only mistake he made in that game was one of the sacks, actually, because it was I forgot who it was, but it came from the other side, right? He got blocked, and then he swung over, and the problem was on the zone. What you had to do was move the zone, and he had to pick up the extra guy that came off the edge. He did not react quickly, and then he ended up getting a sack. That was the only mistake he made. Outside of that, Kendall actually played well, filling in for Teron Armstead. So I was actually encouraged in that sense. I obviously, with Eichenberg, I was incredibly discouraged, because he just made monster mistake after monster. Let me tell you, Robert Hunt made 2 mistakes too in that game. Also he wasn't perfect either.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It wasn't the offensive line.
A lot of guys made mistakes there.
Yeah, it wasn't the offensive line's best game, and my whole point with Kendall Lamb is not to single him out. It's just that backups get exposed with more extended time. And I do think that you'll see Connor Williams back sooner than later. I'm not sure if he's back this week, but I think you'll see him back sooner than later. You're going to have to be without Teron for some time. And like I said, I'm eager to see whether they make a decision on IR for him. I know it's going to be multiple weeks. He'll be back this season, but is it closer to 2 or 3 weeks, or is it closer to a month and a half? That's the question I don't know at this point, and we're going to see. It's that knee again. It's not anything fully torn, but I think it's something that's going to hold him out for some time. So that's where we're going to see more Kendall Lamb. And this team's going to have to get by. They do get, to Dolphins fans' credit, they do bring up a good point. The Giants and Panthers are a couple of get-right games. It doesn't give us an opportunity to learn more about this team, but it helps them get past this period. If they need to struggle through some injuries, they need to get the offensive line a little healthier. This is the 2 games to get them. And then you got Philly up in Philly and Sunday Night Football after that. That'll be their next big test. But I think Tua had the right word. This is a humbling loss for a lot of folks. I think it takes people off their high horse a little bit. It doesn't say the Dolphins aren't going to, make the playoffs or still get a chance at the division or do this and that. It just says this team can be beat. This team is not unstoppable. This team has flaws, and they need to be fixed. And so I'm going to be eager to see how they respond, how they adjust, how Vic Fangio adjusts, how Mike McDaniel adjusts, and that's how we're going to see how good of a team they are.
All right. Follow him on Twitter at Cameron Wolfe. What do you got going on in the NFL Network?
Yeah, I am going to be on NFL Network, the Insider Show tomorrow, Wednesday, 12 to 1 on NFL Plus and 1 to 2 on NFL Network. So we'll talk some Dolphins, I'm sure, leading into the Giants game. And so you'll see me there, and I'll be at the game this weekend as well.
There you go. Cam, as always, appreciate you, my man. We will talk later on in the week. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
You got it. There you go. KSDT CPAs. Make sure you call them, whether it's your personal taxes, whether it's your business taxes. They know how to get it done. And for those of you, if you own a business, man, and you want an edge, they provide all kinds of services from payroll to healthcare to investing to making sure you're planning ahead and understanding what's going on in the market and how it may affect you 6 months to a year down the line. They can help you with all kinds of stuff from advisory to tax to insurances. Call the great people at KSDT CPAs. Offices in Dade, Broward, Palm Beach counties, and now a new office in Charlotte, North Carolina, folks. So if you're looking for work, they're also hiring. Dade, Broward, Palm Beach counties. Look at the number right there, 305-670-3370. If you're looking for the services that you need for your personal taxes, for your business, maybe you need some guidance for your business, use that QR code and reach out to our friends at KSDT CPAs.